Okay, with a cento delay behind us, it's time to learn about some tales wasted away in obscurity. The vast majority of happenings in this world are not recorded in stories, either too trifling or adding no meaning to our lives. These facts of life are coolly cast aside with only the tiniest sliver deemed worthy enough. Each day we relentlessly discard unnecessary fragments of our lives, fragments forever lost to the ether, and we continue to the very moment of our death. I couldn't read the last line though. Tales afforded not their moment in the limelight, left to waste away in obscurity. Slow-killing poison, defectives, paintings, ramblings. We'll go with the slow-killing poison. The best kind of poison. The maid spoke little of what happened after the white-haired girl's disappearance in the era of roses, for she believed the rest of the tale insignificant, of no value to share with her listener, the white-haired girl herself. Thus her role as storyteller ended with the girl's departure from the stage, and while the other character stories continued on, they were cut from the script, afforded not their moment in the limelight, left to waste away in obscurity. A slow-killing poison. Arthur Baldwin was vexed. Shortly before they were to be married, his engagement with Nellie Rhodes, the eldest daughter of the Rhodes family, had been broken off. He understood well enough why it had happened, and had it been his decision, he likely would have made the same one. So Arthur's dissatisfaction lay not with the dissolution itself, nor did he bear any fault in it. His bride-to-be had simply been gripped by madness. I hear she attacked an Abigail. Oh, I was told she took one of her eyes out. Even worse, she killed her. Those are but rumors, my dear. The truth is so much more dreadful. I used to work at the Rhodes Manor, you see, and the young lady, she... Initially, Arthur was skeptical of what the people were saying. He assumed the tales were being exaggerated as they spread. But when the head of the Rhodes family came personally to deliver reparations and formally nullified the engagement, he gave Arthur a rough overview of what had happened. It was apparently true that Nellie had assaulted an Abigail, and it was true that she spent most of her time in her room now, looking pale and sickly and drained of her spirits. And then when he said, outright, a demon's possessed her, Arthur had little choice but to believe something wasn't right. And to top it all off, Nell's older brother Mell ran off to become a priest, presumably to get away from everything. Nellie's father implored Arthur to remain discreet about her situation, not that he had any intention of going around and spreading personal details about her life. However, rumors have a nasty way of slipping through the tiniest of cracks, sneaking about through the dark like a seasoned cat burglar. What nobles like to refer to as social gatherings were in practice more like gossip gatherings. And in short order, the Rhodes family's eldest daughter was the talk of high society. Incidentally, the painter whose downfall eventually culminated in this tragedy was also strangled by the noble grapevine, though Arthur had no way of knowing as much. Perhaps the painter's curse extended beyond the girl's hair color, and the Rhodes family was destined to be brought to ruin by the gossip of their fellow aristocrats. One evening, Arthur decided he would sneak into the Rhodes Manor. He had requested visitations with Nellie on numerous occasions, but had been turned away every time. She is in no condition for company, is what they kept telling him, which left him with no choice but to see her uninvited. The aroma of the roses seemed more overpowering at night than during the day, and he wasn't sure whether it was just his imagination. The nagging irritation it caused in him was, however, not only in his mind. Arthur instructed his coachman to wait on a street a little ways out and rested the way to the manor on foot, entering through the garden. As he waded through the sea of roses, he clenched his teeth. Arthur preferred restraint when it came to both gardening and girls. What am I doing with my life? How did I end up here, sneaking about, trying to find that obnoxious little girl's room? Arthur had few pleasant memories of this rose garden. The Rhodes and the Baldwins had a long history, so as a child he would often find himself left here to play while the adults did business. It was him, Nellie, who could never seem to stop hanging off her brother, and Mell, the textbook definition of a well-behaved aristocrat boy. Not once had he managed to step into the siblings' private world. There was only room for the two of them, leaving Arthur stuck out there all by himself. The best he could manage was a little teasing now and then. For example, saying that her hair looked the color of fallen leaves. I never asked for this engagement anyway. Who would even want to marry a girl who thinks herself some kind of princess? Not for me, that's for sure. But still, he had known her practically his whole life. Of course he was going to be curious when people were saying she had gone mad or been possessed by a demon. He was just curious, he told himself as he drew nearer to Nellie's window. The curtains appeared to be drawn. He couldn't see anything inside. So he crouched down to pick up a few pebbles to toss over the veranda. A few soft taps rang out in the night before the curtain finally shifted. A few moments later, a young girl stumbled out into the moonlight. Despite already knowing the answer, his first thought was, who is that? He wanted to smack himself, but at the same time, it was hard to deny the discrepancies between the girl standing there and the girl of his memories. The moonlight seemed to give her flaxen hair a ghostly bluish tint. It fluttered in a passing breeze, and Arthur felt something about her he'd never had before. She's so pretty. Whoa, slow down. What's wrong with you? Pretty? That self-centered, spoiled little brat? There wasn't a trace of the rambunctious Nellie he knew to be found. She stood there by the veranda's railing, gazing off vaguely into space like a pensive spirit. It wasn't at all what Arthur had expected to see when he came calling. He assumed she would be nothing but skin and bones, haggard and unsightly. Now, Lady Nellie, do you not think it rude to at least greet me? We were engaged, as you might recall. Her eyes still unfocused, Nellie turned her gaze down toward where Arthur stood. It was a reaction, but still he felt as though she had snubbed him, which did little to alleviate the irritation building up since he had arrived. Look, it's like a scene out of your beloved Romeo and Juliet. Not that I'm here enthusiastically, of course. Mumbling complaints to himself, Arthur climbed a nearby tree, leaping from a branch onto the veranda. And there she was, within arm's reach, but as distant as ever. Still, he could see nothing in her eyes. Hello. Say something already, would you, Nellie? Perhaps she really had lost her mind, just not in the way he had been led to believe. Arthur spent a few moments pondering how to proceed. He didn't consider himself a model gentleman like Mell, not even slightly, but he wasn't so crass to laugh it off either. You certainly are quiet tonight, aren't you? I'm not sure how I'm supposed to act when you're like a completely different person. Every time you open your mouth, I want to sew it shut. You're always complaining. Nothing's ever good enough for you. Right now, I just want you to say something. Anything. How am I supposed to know what's going through your head if you don't tell me? Or is there just nothing at all? Nellie's gaze glided past Arthur into the rose garden behind him. Nellie, are you listening to me? He tried again and again to get her attention. Calling her name, waving his hand in front of her face, gently tugging on her hair. But all his attempts were fruitless. She simply stood there, lifeless, a well-crafted doll. He wasn't sure exactly how to describe how he felt. Slightly unsettled to start, a bit of pity to go with it, and a great deal of something yanking at his insides. Arthur had few pleasant memories of the roads. That didn't mean he wanted to erase his past with them entirely, though. But looking at her, this empty shell, he felt almost as though those days were disappearing with her. How irritating. He knew the word wasn't right, but he went with it anyway, heaving a sigh after letting it linger in the air for a moment. It's always been like this. I'm no more than a buzzing insect to you. I can't stand this dreadful rose garden. It was exhausting having to come here again and again just because our families are close. I would try to say something, you'd go off running into your darling brother's arms. Dearest Mell this, dearest Mell that. Is that all you know how to say? And he would just give you a half-hearted smile and pretend to be sorry for not paying attention to you. Arthur looked out over the garden as well. He was more talking to himself than he was to Nellie. I'm sure you don't remember, but one time I even brought you flowers. What were they? Some kind of anemone, I think? But you wouldn't take them. You said the roses here were prettier, so you didn't need my flowers. What a miserable day that was. But staying beside the silent spectre, melancholy overwhelmed any anger or frustration he might have otherwise felt. Perhaps it was because nothing he said managed to elicit any reaction out of her. Perhaps because he wished he had come out and said all this sooner. Unless expressed, feelings merely fester. I don't care one bit about you, and I mean that. It's only ever been about doing what's best for my family. Of course, Nellie was a perfect example of why you couldn't let everything out either. The gossip spoke not only of her attacking an Abigail, but of her destroying her relationship with her brother. And that was what was likely had done the most damage. Knowing what he knew of Nellie in her younger days, Arthur had little trouble believing what the rumors said. That her affection for Mell went far beyond simple familial love. It was for my family, but that doesn't mean I wasn't going to try to get along with you. You probably don't believe me since I never acted like it, but I genuinely did want us to be on good terms. It's just... you had to be the one who changed first. You were always treating me like I was worthless, like I meant nothing to you. Not like any of that would have even left an impression in your one-track mind, of course. But that's why I wanted you to take the first step. I'm not some wise old monk who can just turn my frustration off on command. Arthur let out another sigh. Do you think anything would have gone differently if I could have been more grown up? A gust of wind blew through, setting up a flurry of rose petals, carrying them up past the two of them, and through the velvet curtains into Nellie's bedchamber. A faint smile crossed her lips. Arthur could only guess what was going through her mind, what was reflected in her eyes. In her room he could see several pairs of small children's shoes, a doll with its hair all neatly made up, a pile of sheet music drawn up for her by a well-respected composer earlier, and toys carved from wood. It was like he was looking through a window into the past. That was all he needed to know. He could have treated her like the princess she thought she was, and she would have gone down the same path. Nellie's eyes were on one person only. Arthur wasn't even a shadow on her peripheral. Your brother's still smiling for you in there, isn't he? And that was all she needed. After that night, Arthur stayed away from the roads and never mentioned the siblings again. It was the best thing to do, he thought. He had his own life to worry about. But fate wouldn't allow him to avoid hearing about the family from time to time. Almost 4 years later, Nellie, who had apparently fallen ill, passed away at the young age of 18. The Rhodes held a small funeral service, which Mell did not attend. Arthur couldn't even begin to imagine what he, her brother, felt about it. But another 3 years later, Mell followed behind her. At the age of 24, he threw himself off the top of a church tower. According to those near him, he had been acting unusual in the months leading up to his death, claiming he could hear a woman's voice talking to him. If he had taken his life out of grief, 3 years seemed like too long of a gap. Perhaps it had built up over time, and that was how long it took to reach the boiling point. But that's not how it felt to Arthur. It felt like Mell had been guided there by a higher power. Or maybe pushed. And there was one other strange detail. He had died at exactly the strike of noon, as the bell rang its 12th toll. Wow, that was a very short chapter. Maybe we can actually knock out all 3 here. So I'm gonna grab something to drink, and I will be back. So, with the slow-killing poison behind us, let's investigate the defectives, shall we? So remember, that's Imion's symbol. In the distant Hoei era, while the Tokugawa shogunate governed feudal Japan, Yukimasa Ida made his living far to the west, with little knowledge of what lay beyond the borders of his own native country. The land of the rising sun was an isolated nation, turned nearly everyone away save for traders from a few specific regions. So I don't know what year this is exactly, but that is true that Japan went through a period of isolation prior to just completely throwing open their doors and assimilating foreign culture. If this is the era that I'm thinking it is, that's when they put the Christian missionaries on the beach and burned them alive. So they took that whole isolation thing very, very seriously. and those restrictions applied equally to Japanese who had departed the country before they were put in place. Yukimasa was a third-generation immigrant, having never once set foot in his homeland. And for that reason, as a child, he held a great adoration for the glorious nation described by his grandfather. And he was particularly fond of the katana passed down to him by his grandfather. Though it bore no name, the blade had a curiously bestial glimmer that entranced Yukimasa at first sight. The katana had belonged to Yukimasa's grandmother, but she had passed away before he was born. His grandfather described her as a skilled swordswoman, slight in frame but easily able to take down several men more than twice her size. After his grandfather passed and bequeathed unto him the blade, Yukimasa would from time to time see phantoms of a young woman drenched in blood. She had sharp, narrow eyes like him, that looked more like his than even his parents. He felt almost as though his own reflection had stepped out of the mirror to cut him down. Or like they were a pair of killers, standing shoulder to shoulder. With each recurrence of the illusion, it took root even deeper into his soul, and Yukimasa grew ever more certain that one day he would cross over into their world. That he was simply holding in his true nature. That the beast dwelling within would break loose eventually. This tale, however, is of a time when he was still more man than beast. Defectives. In the wake of framing and killing 2 crewmates for smuggling Spanish silver, Yukimasa was having something of an identity crisis. On both occasions he had been smiling during the act, at least according to those who had seen him. If what they said were true, he wasn't conscious of it, but he particularly didn't doubt their words either. It was in all likelihood true. He had killed 2 men, and enjoyed doing it. What unsettled Yukimasa most, though, was that his initial reaction was, I wonder what I'm going to become. None of him was concerned for the men whose lives he had stolen. Once their still warm bodies hit the water, that was that. He held no nostalgia for the months they had spent out at the sea together. He didn't care what kind of men they had been, or how much their families might grieve over their loss. Yukimasa wondered if that made him narcissistic. The lack of interest in anyone but himself seemed to fit the bill, but he didn't actually feel like he held himself in very high stature. He simply had his vague awareness of himself as a twisted, unsightly creature. On that day, the ship stopped at a small port town to replenish supplies and give the crew a few days to stretch their legs. They were still about 2 months out from Amsterdam, where his beloved awaited his return. What a hellish trip that was! A cruiseman of Western origin naturally muttered. If I never have to hear the word smuggle again, it'll be too damn soon. The way the whole crew's got their cheeks clenched after that's driving me mad. Not blaming you, I mean, just how it is. Yukimasa shook his head and gave the man a faint smile. And in his mind he chuckled about how no one could seem to see through his mask. The blame lay with him for much more than just the tension on the ship. Real shit job you got stuck with there. I don't know if I'd been able to do it and keep a straight face like you did. Bet you're aching to let out some steam, ain't ya? You can be straight with me. I could certainly stand for some relief, yes. That much was true. However, Yukimasa meant it in a different way. Come with me tonight, then. I know the perfect place to get you what you need. The tan seaman smirked, which was all Yukimasa needed to know what he was insinuating. He hesitated to come up with a response. Worried about Captain Asma? Don't, I ain't gonna tell him. Besides, it's not like he doesn't have needs too, you get me? Some of the crew knew that Yukimasa was romantically involved with the captain's daughter, and the man standing before him seemed to assume his hesitation stemmed from that. But Captain Asma would, as the seafarer had said, spend his time off satisfying his personal needs. That was just part of life on the sea. Everyone understood, and no one considered it being unfaithful. Requiring a ship full of vigorous young men to save themselves for their partners, who they would often not see for months at a time, could in fact be considered a form of torture. There were a number of brothels scattered about the port town. For them, sailors were practically the ideal clients. The ship only stayed around for a few days to a week, meaning no time to get attached or cause other similar problems. About the only complaint a prostitute might have is that sailors tended to be quite pent up. They weren't the kind of clientele a new recruit could generally handle. That settles it tonight. Grab something to eat, and then we'll meet up at... Yukimasa forced a smile for the man, who had taken his silence as a yes. But he wasn't worried about Captain Osmond finding out or being unfaithful to Pauline. He simply wasn't sure how much he could trust the seaman's recommendation. And the last thing he wanted was to catch some kind of disease. Yukimasa was paired up with a skeletal girl with faded brown hair, which she had done up so much it only served to emphasize the lack of anything anywhere else on her body. This is your idea of the perfect place? He couldn't deny his disappointment at his assignment, who boasted absolutely nothing of what he sought in a woman. In fact, he was afraid he might snap her in half. As the other pairs heated up beyond the thin curtains, Yukimasa's interest plummeted. If a woman tried to seduce him, he would act in accordance with his base instincts. But otherwise, Yukimasa didn't have a particularly strong libido, so... You're not into this at all, are you? No, I just... It's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to trade me for another girl. I used to have a few regulars, but these days I've got nothing. Sooner or later they're going to toss me out on my ass, and I'll have to resort to back alley quickies to make a living. You're the customer. You've got every right to complain to the manager about drawing the short straw. She sounded like a woman hanging from her last thread. I'm not going to cause any trouble for you. Well, aren't you, sweet? Your loss, she said with a snicker. I object to being called sweet, but anyway, I stand out more than most, so if I make a scene, it's more likely to escalate. You even went out of your way to explain yourself, so I object to your objection. But you do have a point. You're from the Far East, aren't you? Don't see many of your kind around these parts, so it's no surprise you draw attention. You know what? I've changed my mind. Don't ask for another girl. Clients like you only come around once in a blue moon, so I'd rather not let you go. Let's both avoid making a fuss and stay here together. You make it sound like I'm some kind of exotic animal. You're cute when you scowl. We can find out if you're an animal later, but you certainly are exotic. You're not even going to pretend this is a business exchange anymore, are you? I mean, why bother? I'm just the leftover scraps that nobody wanted. There was something oddly charming about her gleeful laugh, combined with a stream of self-deprecation, which would have been less of an issue for Yukimasa had he become physically intimate with Pauline yet. Because by comparison, this prostitute would look like nothing more than a couple dried twigs tied together. But he wouldn't be able to see Pauline for another couple months. And he was beginning to think this girl might just do the trick for now. Their ship was scheduled to stay in port for about a week. Although they would have to spend some time moving cargo on and off the boat, the stay was, by and large, a recreational one. It was early afternoon, while much of the crew had gathered together to go drinking, Yukimasa was taking a relaxed walk along the shore. He was no less interested in exploring the unfamiliar port town as anyone else, but unlike them, he wasn't the kind of man whose first instinct was to go straight to the pub. They all jabbed him for being stiff and tight-assed, none the wiser to the primal urges he kept buried within. And who would ever suspect it either? Who could watch him walk up to an elderly man fishing on the dock, ask, "How's the catch?" with a smile, and imagine a bloodthirsty beast lurked within? The man gave a lazy nod in return, adding, "Ain't half bad today." "You're a sailor, I wager, am I right?" the man said as Yukimasa made to resume his walk. "You are. Well, a warning for you then, outsider. You do best to stay away from any back alleys after dark. It ain't safe at night, nohow." Yukimasa gave the man a half-smile, feeling somewhat patronized by his warning. He was plenty capable of discerning where the dangerous parts of town were, and he was confident in his ability to defend himself if someone tried to attack. There's already been several victims. Yukimasa froze. As in, murders. Killer deader and dead. Killed deader and dead. And they still ain't caught him neither. Wouldn't want any of our guests to end up next on the list. Out of curiosity, how does he kill? The old man turned his gaze down, his face becoming a shadow against the clear blue ocean stretching up behind him. He dismembers them. Hard to imagine, eh? Cutting a person into a bunch of pieces. He don't discriminate neither. Man, woman, child, don't matter none. He's a sicko, complete madman. And they ain't found no pattern to the victims neither. Nothing to say who he might be or who he might choose next. So don't think you're safe just because you're not from around here. Yukimasa could feel his vision narrowing, converging on a single point. Oh, he could imagine. He could imagine clear as the afternoon sky. And oh, how he wished. Well, look who it is. Fancy running into you here. So in case you didn't see, how he wished that could be. A woman's voice dragged him back to reality. He felt like he had just been pulled up from the bottom of the ocean, and when he turned to face her, he must have still looked a bit dazed, judging from the way she raised her eyebrows at him. Let me guess. You don't recognize me, not made up all for work? It's me, the girl from yesterday. She held her hair up in an approximation of her previous night's hairstyle, to which Yukimasa gave an ah in feigned realization. So what are you doing wandering out here? Bored? Got nothing better to do? He wondered if the woman was even capable of being less blunt, especially considering he had technically been her client the night before. I'm just taking a walk. Not much to see out here. There's the ocean. Don't you get enough of that when you're out on it? I'll never tire of the sight of the sea. Is that so? She said, followed by a softer, slightly exasperated, I'll never understand guys. But a few seconds later, she gave him a big smile. So hey, you're not busy. Why don't you come to my place? I can throw together a bare-bones little lunch. Again, I'm taking a walk. And bare-bones is hardly a convincing sales pitch. I'd say if you want a quality meal, pony up for some goods. Ah, so that was what she meant. Apathetic, but finding no reason to turn her invitation down, Yukimasa agreed to go along. I've taken a liking to you, she had said. Stop by whenever you've got the chance, at least until you have to take off. I can treat you even better than when I'm on the job, and free of charge. What do you have to lose? So that's exactly what Yukimasa did. Seeing her became part of his daily routine. And the more time they spent together, the more he learned about her. She had once been married and planning to start a family, but money troubles led to debt piling on, which led to her husband running out on her. And with the entirety of the debt on her shoulders, she had to start working, which was how she ended up at a brothel. As she told her story, Yukimasa showed a fair degree of sympathy, but took the whole thing with a grain of salt. If everything she said was true, she'd had a hard life indeed, but there was no guarantee it was. Yukimasa made certain not to be openly dismissive or skeptical, though, to play the good listener. There was one thing he could be certain of, though. He felt a tiny bit of solidarity in the woman's solitude. The scene she was missing something. The sense she had a hunger. The sense she had a hole that couldn't be filled. The sense that she was defective. You know, we get on pretty well, don't you think? Maybe you could, I don't know, take me as your mistress? She sounded like she was only playing around, but still he responded with, it's not wise to pair two defectives together. What's that supposed to mean, she said with a scowl. Yukimasa's ship was to depart the following day, and that evening, the woman asked him to stay the night, to which he was unsure how to react. Don't you have work? I'll just say I wasn't feeling well. It's not like anyone wants me there. But don't you need the... I can survive taking one day off. I want to be with you. And with that, he could come up with no further objections. Regardless of what he did, he would be heading back out to sea the following day, likely never to see the woman again. So rather than waste time debating her own life choices, it would be easier for everyone if he just let her do as she pleased. Tomorrow none of it would be his concern after all. He agreed, and she gave him a big smile in response. I'm going to make you a feast tonight, she said. You're paying, though. Yukimasa wondered if, perhaps, what she wanted most was to play like they were a real family. That was probably it. What she was missing in her life wasn't love or romance, but someone to sit around the table and enjoy a meal with. But that raised a new question. What happened after she'd had her fun? She found someone to fill the hole in her spirit, but it was fake, and the hole wouldn't stay filled forever. Oh, I'm doing something terribly cruel to her, aren't I? There was nothing he could do about that anymore, though. Even if she were to ask him to stay, he didn't have that option. May I ask you something, he said. Yeah? How did it feel when you lost your family, your sanctuary? You sure know how to go right for the heart. I apologize. I don't want to think about anything that might bring my mood down. If you want to know what it feels like, experience it for yourself. Find yourself a girl and get her to run off on you. Seemingly taking his silence for discomfort, the woman let out a soft laugh and said, "But I don't want you to have to go through that." Supper was a seafood stew. Hardly a feast, but there was a homely warmth to the meal. Something she had likely honed over the years. When a man is incomplete, missing a vital part of what makes him human, what becomes of him? Did he lash out? Does he lose the will to live? Does he forget what kind of man he is? Yukimasa didn't think he fit into any of those categories. In the middle of the night, Yukimasa silently slipped out of bed and made his way for the door. Wait. But he didn't make it 2 steps before the woman grabbed him by the sleeve. She must have been awake the whole time. There was no way she could have noticed him leaving otherwise. Don't do this to me. I've had more than enough of waking up to an empty bed, and I'm not going to let it happen again. Not this time. You may think sneaking off without saying a word is the cleanest way to end things, but you're wrong. Stay until morning. Let me say a proper goodbye. No, I wasn't. You weren't what? Of course you were. I don't care if you think of me as a free tale for the week. You're just going to forget about when it's over. I'm using you for my personal satisfaction, too. But the one thing I won't stand for is you just up and disappearing on me. You're not the one being left behind, so you don't understand how worthless and pathetic that makes you feel. It hurts. It hurts so much more than anything else you could do. Don't leave me. That was probably what she wanted to say more than anything else. The loneliness that had created the hole in her heart was making waves, and this was the real desire that lay hidden in her words. She didn't want to be alone anymore. I'm not leaving. I'll be back. There's something I wanted to give you, and I was just going to get it. And what would that be? It's, my way of showing gratitude. I think the word you're looking for is present. Yes, that. Her eyes were locked with Yukimasa's. She was staring through the darkness in an attempt to ascertain how truthful he was being. After 10 or 15 seconds of glaring, she let him go. I won't be long, he said with a smile. As he walked down the moonlit port, Yukimasa's mind raced. No one truly understands themselves more than superficially. Some say you know yourself best. Others say it's quite the opposite. The concept of the self is full of such uncertainties, contradictions. Yukimasa suspected. He was suppressing himself with his self. So while he had a reasonable grasp on who his outer self was, his inner self was a complete mystery, and that fact sometimes sent a chill down his spine. Who was he? What did he want in life? Which self, which of his desires was the real him? Self, 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 self. He felt sick. About 30 minutes later, he was back. Within seconds of him knocking on the woman's door, it was open. She must have been waiting there, anxious for his return. The woman met his eyes, gave him a pouty smile, then slowly lowered her gaze. Her eyes gradually widened, shooting up and down as they did. I've never been very good about thinking of anyone other than myself. I consider myself proficient enough at conversation, but if I'm not careful, my mind always seems to drift back to myself instead of focusing on who I'm talking to. That said, I've spent a great deal of time thinking about you. The woman took a step back. Yukimasa followed. And having concluded, this is the best way for me to make you happy. She didn't even have time to let out a shriek. There was only the sound of steel slicing flesh. metal grinding against bone, as the nameless katana pierced the woman's breast. Her mouth flapped open and shut, while her eyes were held wide open, affixed on the man standing before her. Faint gasps escaped her lips in sputters. Perhaps she wanted to scream. Perhaps she wanted to cry, and shout, and say this wasn't what she wanted. But there wasn't enough strength left in her emaciated body to do either. As blood spilled down the sides of her lips, she mustered the last scraps of her strength. And with it, she forced out her parting words, carefully chosen and enunciated to ensure he heard every last one. You pitiful man. What kind of hopeless fool would throw their life away just to kill a worthless prostitute? She cursed him as her life slipped away. Yukimasa, however, let out a laugh and muttered, "Don't you worry. I still have enough control to not act sheerly on impulse." Hey, Yukimasa? You hear about that whore you'd been banging? She was killed last night, cut to pieces like the others. I swear, it's like trouble follows you wherever you go. Lord almighty, stay away from me, man. I don't want to catch the attention of whatever evil spirit's taking a liking to you. That was probably best. He would be safer keeping his distance. Yukimasa gazed idly out at the poor town as it faded from view. He then turned toward the ocean. That vast, familiar blue expanse. The waves against the boat sounded vaguely like splashing blood. "Can I ask you something, Pauline?" Yukimasa said in the warm embrace of his sweetheart. "Anything. What would you think if I were actually an unspeakably evil man?" "Huh? Where did that come from?" she asked with a smile, evidently assuming the question was in jest. "Idle curiosity. Well, bad people come in all shapes and forms. What sorts of bad things would you do? How about committing murder? Deceiving people?" The words that came from Yukimasa's mouth were not the ones he prepared to say, which came as a surprise even to him. Why had he not been able to say what he had wanted? What reason could he have possibly had? Did he not want to raise any suspicions? No, that wasn't it. Is being dishonest really evil? Sure, it's bad if you lie to cheat someone out of their money or cause them pain. But no one's perfectly honest with everyone they meet. I try to be straightforward and truthful as best I can, but I'm sure I slip from time to time. So listen to me, Yukimasa. Pauline gave a wide, infinitely loving smile. Even if you have something to hide, something you're ashamed to tell me, that won't change how I feel about you. You've got nothing to worry about. Besides, I plan to be with you for years and years to come. You want to know what my life's dream is? I'd love to. My dream is to live out a long, quiet life with you. I don't need anything extravagant, just an ordinary life, slowly growing older, having 3, maybe 4 children. We'd never fight, and eventually before I knew it, I'd be an old lady thinking, it was an uneventful life, but it was the best I could have asked for. That's the life I want. And what about you? Now he understood. He didn't want to risk cracking the foundation she provided him, the sanctuary she formed around him. Yes, I too wish for a peaceful life with you. The Painting's Ramblings. Why, hello there, Giselle. Doing your rounds again. Such a diligent young lady you are. You could get away with cleaning this place once every couple decades and no one be the wiser. What? You're not Giselle? That's someone else. Oh, no, you're just the maid? And who am I, you ask? Well, this is quite the pickle. What on earth could have happened while I was dozing off? think you're just a maid and you think you're the witch at the same time? You've forgotten just about everything, and I don't think anything I say is going to fix that. You do seem a bit mellower now and not so constantly miserable. Wasn't sure what to say to you before, or if I should say anything at all. So I didn't say much, out of consideration for you. Not that you can really tell from looking at me, I guess. If forgetting takes some weight off you, then maybe it's for the best. Not that I think you should forget, and not that I want you to forget about Michel. But I won't blame you for choosing not to spend God knows how much longer agonizing over it. Nothing wrong with abandoning ship, especially considering how long you spent on it. And hey, it hurt me too seeing you in so much pain. So we both come out on top here, I guess. What a kind painting, you say. Well, thank you kindly. But the truth is, I'm not nearly as upstanding a guy as people think I am. And it was us Boulangers that turned your life upside down, and caused you all that misery and suffering. Yeah, I know, the first dumbfounded smile was testament enough. Everything I say is going in one ear and out the other. Which means I'm free to say whatever I want. By the time tomorrow rolls around, you'll have forgotten all about the curious talking painting you chanced upon today. So we'll start with this. It's a huge relief to see you smiling again. It's not the smile of someone right in the head, I can see that much. But it's a lot easier in the eyes and the heart than how you were before. Like I said, I'm a real winner. I'm not particularly concerned about putting up appearances here. Call me heartless if you will. You wouldn't be wrong. I'm not going to pretend I'm some saint. But at the same time, I'm not going to play like I'm a cackling villain either. If there's one thing I don't want people to see, though, it's me looking weak. I'm the laid-back guy without a care in the world. That's who I want people to see when they look at me. My big brother was your standard cookie-cutter, you can count on me for anything, kind of brother. I mean, that ended up not being the case, but he sure looked the part. And Michel, he always looked up to D. Went to him for everything, gave him all his love. D was tall and well-built, muscular. Everything about him screamed manly man. And I kinda admired that too, though not nearly as much as Michel did. I became a painter in part because I didn't want to follow in my brother's footsteps. Not to say I don't like painting, I love it. But people weren't going to be inclined to compare us as often. I didn't have to be as fit as him or as good at chess. I had my own thing to be good at. Art. I couldn't beat him at his own game, so I beat him at mine. And my whole not a care in the world deal was probably, at least on some level, a shield against having to admit I couldn't compare. If we were a few years further apart, maybe we could have just had the same admiration and respect for him as Michel. But there's not much gained past that boyish competitiveness when you're so close in age. I know I've been rambling at you for a while already. Would you mind sticking around a little longer? Great. I've got an old story I'd like to get off my chest. This is something I was planning to take to the grave, and something I didn't think Giselle ever needs to know. But, well, you say you're not Giselle anymore, and I'm already in the grave, so what the hell? I'm just gonna talk to myself for a bit here, and if you kindly forget anything you may overhear, that'd be lovely. Back before I became a painting, I was the head of the Boulanger family. Though I spent most of my time painting, it really wasn't the job for me, though. A guy who half-assed his way straight through life, so I left all the businessy stuff to my wife, Amy. Now, she was a real capable girl. If she'd been born a guy, she would have made one heck of a diplomat. Possibly even caught the king's eye. Before we were married, she'd had a bit of a fling with Dee, which she felt real bad about later. Probably didn't help that I had a tendency to bring it up from time to time. Not all the time, just occasionally. But that aside, she was a faithful, hard-working partner. It did take long for us to become known as the dope and his able bride. To which Amy would always interject, "Georg is a very capable man, thank you very much." Now that probably makes it sound like I just shoved all the work of running the house onto her, but in truth, she wanted the job. She quite enjoyed it, and who was I to complain? It also meant I didn't have to deal with one of the family's more significant dilemmas. Namely, my mother. Not to be crass, but Mom was not quite all there. She'd always been a bit of a nervous wreck, and it didn't take much to set her off. But it was what happened with Michel that finally broke her. Mom had, I guess you could say, a very particular image of what she wanted Michel to be, and he ended up not fitting that image. Now you're probably thinking, that doesn't seem like such a big deal, but it is. I just can't tell you why. Michel has to be the one to tell you. Anyway, some bad stuff went down, and at the end of it all, Mom was constantly hovering over the edge. Dad gave up on her entirely, and I wasn't sure how to approach her, so I kept my distance. Amy was the only one in the family who would actively engage with Mom. So while she had betrayed me once, I had come to trust Amy again. We had a couple kids, I turned into a doting father, and life was swell. All my problems swept under the rug. Mom's condition, Michel. I left it all to Amy and enjoyed a pleasant, carefree life. But then Giselle, or I guess you're just the maid now, not long after, Michel died. My oh my, you really aren't Giselle anymore, huh? So back to my rambling. Michel died and I got furious at Dee over it. But I kept coming back to that. Who really deserved the brunt of the blame in that situation? It's nice and comfy to sit back and do nothing. You can throw blame around all you want. It wasn't your fault after all. You're not the one who killed him, you know. It wasn't long afterwards that Dee died too. Killed on the battlefield. I was told he died a very noble death, but I couldn't help but think he was in a hurry to escape. Listening to the news, I kept telling myself I shouldn't have snapped at him like that. I shouldn't have blamed him. Dee had to choose between protecting Mom or protecting our brother, and he settled on Mom. He was too hard-headed to come up with a way to protect them both. But even if he had, it was too risky. He served the church directly, and we were all under its thumb. If word spread that one of our own had supposedly sold his soul to the devil, that would be the end of the Boulanger family. I wouldn't have escaped unscathed either. Losing both of my brothers in quick succession crushed me. And as I started breaking down, it was, you guessed it, Amy who comforted me. It's terrible what happened, but it's not your fault. That was around when I began sensing something was off. I mean, she'd had a thing with a D. You'd expect she would have been bawling her eyes out right alongside me. So why on earth was she so calm? But I didn't press her on it. I knew I wouldn't get an answer even if I did. And I also didn't have much of a right to question Amy when I was pushing all my problems onto her. Doubly so knowing that opening my dumb mouth was what had done this to Dee in the first place. And before long, we went back to our normal routine. About 8 years after Michel's death, Mom was gone too, and the Boulanger family was down to me, Amy, and our 2 sons. I had started teaching the boys how to paint, and I loved every minute of it. And then one day I started feeling unwell. My fingers would get kind of tingly, such that holding a brush for long periods of time would hurt. So gradually my time spent both teaching and painting dwindled, and even leaving the manor became difficult. At first I just thought it was a little strange, nothing to be worried about. But then it started getting real bad, and I'd be stuck in bed for days at a time. We called a doctor to look at me, but he couldn't find anything wrong. Amy said I must be overworking myself, and she made me these nice hearty meals, hoping to bring back my energy. But my condition only got worse. Eventually I started losing my appetite. But Amy, she insisted I eat out anyway, or I would never get better. So you know what I did? I tossed out the meals she made when she wasn't looking. I sent my younger boy out to town to fetch me food in secret. And for a while I ate that instead of Amy's meals, making sure it looked like nothing had changed. After a week or two, the tingling in my fingers started going away. I could only laugh. Laugh and grit my teeth, then cry my eyes out. I made a life with this woman, trusted her, and she goes and does this. Anger and sorrow were drowned out by raw heartbreak. My firstborn, he was getting to be about the age he could take over, which is why I used my younger son to run errands for me. I couldn't be sure the two weren't working together. I was at a total loss. What are you supposed to do when your wife's trying to poison you to a slow death? Even now, I'm not sure what the right course of action in that situation would have been. Maybe I could have banished her, had her punished, but remember, I was only head in name. She handled everything, and there was no way I would have been able to pick up the pieces after throwing her out. And if my suspicions were right and my older boy was in on it too, getting rid of Amy wouldn't have solved anything. What then? Spend the rest of my days living in fear of my own family? I was, by that point, worn pretty thin, both physically and emotionally. Every thought led me to the worst possible outcome. I couldn't for the life of me come up with a workable solution. Eventually it got into my head that it was punishment, that I deserved it. Obviously what Amy was doing wasn't right, but my hands weren't exactly clean either. Maybe Mom could have recovered if I had looked after her. Maybe Dee would still be alive if I had put myself in his shoes instead of just snapping at him. Maybe if I had given everyone the care and attention they deserved, Michel wouldn't have had to die. Burying your head in the sand doesn't absolve you of responsibility. And when I finally realized how great a sin inaction was, it was far too late. I'm dumb, short-sighted, and I hated myself for not figuring that out sooner. It should have been stupidly obvious what my action and inaction were doing to the people around me. I should have seen all this coming. Yeah, Amy had betrayed me, but she wasn't the only one guilty of that. When I was going through Michel's stuff after his death, I came across a painting that had been torn to shreds. That I had made. By refusing to use my head, I had done something that denied his identity. And he left this world still carrying the pain I had caused him. By the time I had come to that conclusion, I wondered why I was even alive at all. I couldn't blame anyone for wanting me dead, so I started eating Amy's meals again, knowing good and well it would likely kill me. I didn't stop saying my younger boy out, though. Just not for food. I also strongly encouraged him to move out and become a court artist. Then I started painting again. It was going to be my final piece. Every day the tingling in my hands spread a little farther. My breathing grew a little more labored. I was afraid I might not finish, while I was still able to get out of bed. But I somehow managed. It was the most harrowing experience I'd had painting something in my entire life. True to her facade, Amy stayed at my side until my last breath. She held my hand tight, giving me a strained smile. It didn't occur to me at that time, but Amy always seemed to be smiling, no matter what. In a way, it's kind of impressive how she managed to keep up the loving wife act, while simultaneously loading me up with poison. Tell me, Amy, how deep did your poison flow? When you were looking after Mom, did you talk about Michel? Knowing you probably figured out he was still alive. And I bet you read his final letter to her. It was you who pushed her to set everything in motion, wasn't it? There were so many things I wanted to say, but I stayed my tongue and made these my parting words. I loved you so much, Amy. So I ask you this. Keep my last painting in memory of me. I have no idea if she actually did as I requested, but the last thing I saw before I passed was her nodding, a smile on her lips. The paint I used to make it, I mixed with a special something I had my younger boy go out and buy for me. A substance that, according to what I was told, slowly dissolves into the air, making it toxic. And it has some sort of reaction with the paint as well, turning it almost black. I'm quite proud of how it turned out, if I do say so myself. It was a gorgeous landscape painting. Sorry for rambling at you for so long. That's the end of my story. Were you even listening to me? What, you have to go clean the fireplace? Well, alright, don't let me keep you. Just, please, make sure you forget about everything by tomorrow, alright? I'm kind on you. I know, why even say anything, right? I wanted to tell someone. I just don't want anyone to actually know about it. The human's heart is a big ball of contradictions like that, you know? You don't. Oh, okay. Well, see ya. It'll be another few decades before you come by again, I imagine. And when you do, it'll be our first time meeting again. Will you even be able to hear my voice anymore by then? Maybe best if I forgot everything too. Who knows? So long, maid, and take care. When an angel comes to judge me, how will his scales tilt? Towards forgiveness? Or towards reckoning? But you know, I don't want it to be an angel who makes that decision. No. You don't have to be an angel. You don't have to be an angel at all. And that concludes the painting's ramblings. So that was all 3 tales wasted away in obscurity. So when we pick up next time, we'll be pursuing Happily Ever After.